identity, culture, and moments that stick with us long after the final whistle. So hopefully you'll hear a lot of that today. So first with us, we have Maddie Lee. She is a sports reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Yes. Maddie covers teams, trends, and human interest stories with a strong focus on fairness, access, and telling stories that matter beyond the box score. We have Adam Amin, one of the most recognizable voices in sports broadcasting today. Adam calls games for the NFL, the NBA, MLB, and college athletics, and has built a career around preparation, versatility, and storytelling on the biggest stages. He's also childhood teammates with Mr. Williams. If any of you know Mr. Williams down in student services, I'm sure he can give you plenty of dirt as well, maybe.
Sure. Tell him that I'm upset that he didn't show up to this today. I know he's got other stuff and important things to do, but please tell him I'm upset that I didn't get to see him.
Maybe he's watching from his office?
That's even creepier. Yeah. Awesome. Love that.
Which seems sort of ironic, being the...
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems a little odd, when you think about it.
And then finally, down here at the end, we have Tom Waddle, graduate of Boston College, Cincinnati native, and former Chicago Bear wide receiver and longtime Chicago sports radio host. Tom brings the athlete's perspective into sports storytelling and has spent years translating locker room experience for fans. So please join me in welcoming our remarkable panelists. As we begin our discussion, if a question pops into your head, if something all of a sudden you're like, hey, I got to ask this now, please throw up your hands. I'm pretty certain our journalists will love the opportunity to hear more from you than certainly from me. We want to make sure we keep this discussion going, and you're a big part of that. So again, please make sure you're ready. So we're going to kind of start at the beginning, okay? How did each of you first realize that sports journalism or broadcasting could be a career, not just something you enjoyed, but something you wanted to pursue seriously?
You want to start it up, Tommy?
Well, I'm the only non-journalist here. It's interesting because I have a finance background. I went to Boston College and have a finance degree. So when I came to Chicago in '89, kind of toiled on the practice squad and finally kind of earned a spot to contribute with the Chicago Bears, and lasted in the city on the gridiron until '95. I retired in 1995. But in the process, I was introduced. It was that, Mike Ditka was still the head coach, and it was the heyday of the Sunday night TV shows. So, in 92 or 93, I was doing a Sunday night recap show with CBS. And then my final year in 94, I think I was doing a radio show once a week on Tuesday night from Michael Jordan's restaurant with Dave Ennett. It was introduced to the medium of, sports broadcasting. And, I kind of, with no background and no experience, I was kind of drawn to it because there's a performative element to it that you can connect, I think, in some ways to playing sports. So when I retired in 1995, my father was like, well, what are you going to do with that finance degree? And I said to my dad, I think I'm going to talk sports for a living. And he was like, well, okay, whatever works for you. But I had an opportunity to segue into radio and television. And I will say this, not to bore you with, the stories of an ex-athlete, but when your career's over, there's an enormous void that exists. And at least I found that. I was playing football and baseball and basketball since I was 8 years old. And to retire at the age of 29, after really that's all you knew, there is just a giant hole that has to be filled. And there's really nothing I to this day am, on the verge of being 59 years old and having been in this industry now for better than 30 years, I have not found anything that kind of recaptures that adrenaline rush or that performative element that existed in me as an athlete, like the world of sports broadcasting. I had no background in it. Had the gift of gab, I guess. But when the red light goes on, whether it's on television or the on-air light comes on in a radio studio, you have to have something to say. You have to perform. And I remember being on camera in Los Angeles with the NFL Network, and the light went on from the first day I was working there, and I was like, this is no different than your number being called on 3rd and 7 with 30 seconds left in the game. So you have to kind of perform. So I guess long story short, I was given the opportunity just, to recap football games and express my experiences, and then that kind of blossomed into the career that I've enjoyed more than I could have ever imagined. And I get an opportunity in the greatest sports city in the world to talk football, basketball, baseball, hockey, other things that aren't sports related. But really, that's kind of how I got involved with it. And I'm thrilled that I didn't go back to Boston or go to New York and join all of my contemporaries in the world of Wall Street. Probably would have made more money, but it would have been less
Important to
fulfilling.
note that just out of the gate. It's like you probably would have made more money in New York, but you seem like the happiest guy. You're one of my
I
happiest
love
friends.
it. Yeah, I love it. It's a gift to be able to do this, and like I said, it's the closest thing that I can imagine that exists to compare to the thrill and the blessing that I had being able to play in the NFL.
I also thought that I was going to go into a more lucrative career. I started out, I've been doing sports journalism since I was in high school. I wrote for my high school newspaper, I wrote for my college newspaper, but I always thought that was just for fun. And my plan was to go into sports medicine. Both my parents are doctors. I had Tommy John surgery in college. I just spent a ton of time in the training room. It made a lot of sense. But probably my sophomore year, I had the realization that even though, my science classes were fine, no offense to any science teachers around or any of you who are excited about science, I just didn't love it as much as the writing that I was doing for the newspaper at the time. And so I made the switch, and I haven't looked back, and it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
I'm going to do a quick poll. How many of you are juniors and seniors? Raise your hand or make some noise. Yeah, okay. I was just curious because I was around your age, and I didn't know that this was a job. I didn't know that this was an actual career. I watched sports religiously. I played them religiously. And then my performance thing that Tommy was talking about, mine was doing this, being on stage. I was a big theater kid. I played violin. I was in choir. I was an all-state actor and singer and all this stuff. I thought I was going to go to Turin, Italy for opera at one point in my life, and that completely changed after my voice dropped, so that wasn't going to happen at all. So I'm 16 or 17 years old. I'm a good student. I have a lot of wide-ranging interests, and I have no clue how I'm going to apply them to anything I want to do. My parents are immigrants. They're very hardworking people. They set a very high standard for what you're supposed to do in terms of approach and how you're supposed to attack whatever it is that you're doing professionally or personally. And I didn't really know how I was supposed to apply all that. So in my head, I'm like, well, I'll go to Bradley. I'll go get a business degree. I'll work with my father. I'll take over the family business because my dad ran a couple of businesses. I'll just do that. And it's because I didn't really know what other avenue I had, and I didn't know that all the interests that I had and the things that I was passionate about, I didn't know that you could apply those to a career. So as a senior in high school, a friend of mine said, you should try broadcasting. So I messed around with it in high school a little bit. It was more so an excuse to do Friday night high school football games on public access TV and talk about my friends like Jeff or Nick or Joe. These are guys I grew up with, and I knew stories about them. So it was fun to be able to say, oh, Joe, when he was 9, he broke his right arm and he had to throw left-handed. I knew that because he was my friend, and I played football with him growing up, and I had so much fun talking about my friends on public access television, and something clicked in my head. I was like, oh, this is fun, and I love sports, and I knew I wasn't going to play them. I was too small. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't good enough. I was like, I think I can parlay this feeling that I get when I'm on stage, playing the violin or acting or singing, my love for sports, and this sudden urge to tell funny things about friends of mine, all of this combined into this thought, maybe I could do this for a career. And somebody told me, if you want to pursue this, you can actually pursue it in college. So I did. Never left the college radio station, learned everything I possibly could about the ins and outs of radio and TV, and then spent most of my extracurricular time covering games, learning how to be in a locker room, learning how to ask questions, learning how to deal with athletes who are upset in the moment that they had just lost a game. You have to learn how to manage people's emotions. You're kind of a conduit for a lot of these things. So for me, until I was like 16, 17, 18 years old, right around the age that you guys are, I had no clue that this was a thing that I could do. And then all these other elements of my life and like my personality suddenly merged, and I thought, oh, this is a career I can actually pursue. So that's how I got into this.
I love that because I mean, you have a glimpse at, three people that have come from different backgrounds, maybe similar interests, right? And, two of the three, and Maddie, I'm sure you'd say it too, there's that performative aspect of it where, sports journalism is hyper competitive, right? In order to get in, you've got to not only put in the time, but you've got to grind. And of course, you're pursuing something you're passionate about. What is it, just out of curiosity, it just kind of popped in my head while all of you were talking, and two of the three of you didn't necessarily grow up in Chicago, and Adam, you've been here, but what is it about Chicago that makes it a great sports city and makes it so appealing in terms of, covering our sports? Because it's not like we are bereft with championships. It's not like every single year we're getting one. So what is it about Chicago that makes it great?
I mean, I grew up in a time where it was a championship city. Like, I was very fortunate. Like, I grew up in the 1990s. I was born in 86. So we watched Michael Jordan and the Dynasty Bulls. The Cubs started to get a little bit better in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The White Sox had some good seasons. They won a World Series in 2005. So, like, we had some form of, like, excitement. But I think being in Chicago, it's a big market. Like, it's the third largest media markets. New York, LA, Chicago typically are the three biggest. And we have a lot of teams. Like, that also helps. You have a wide range of interests that you can latch onto, and everybody wants to be a part of that in some form or fashion. Chicago is a provincial place. I've covered college sports. I know Maddie's covered college sports. Like, it's a little different when you go to an SEC town, or like you live in a Pac-12 city or something like that out on the West Coast. Like, it's just a little bit different. It doesn't have that same provincial nature. I think Tommy could probably speak to that as an athlete. I know Maddie would be able to say that just covering Chicago's teams. Like, there is a provincial passion that goes along with it. I think that's probably what makes it fun for us.
Yeah, I grew up in Seattle, so Pac-12 town. And I came here for the first time for grad school. I went to Northwestern. And you're just struck by how much the whole city cares. I think there are just so many fantastic, invested sports fans everywhere who are engaging with what we're saying, what we're writing. I think the radio culture here is something that
It's
you
different
don't.
here.
It's so different.
It's different.
And you can speak to that much more than I can, but you just don't find that in lots of towns. And so I think to be able to come here and to write about sports that people really clung to, whether these teams were good or bad or somewhere in the middle, was just very, very appealing. And so I came here for grad school, I left, and I really, really wanted to come back. And so as soon as there was a job opportunity, I jumped at that chance.
I think sports is an escape for a lot of people. It's a profession for some in any number of tangential ways, but I think it's an escape. And I think in this city, what I found was it's just a passionate group of people who want to love their teams, which is a little bit different if you go to the East Coast, having been to Boston and been around some obnoxious Red Sox fans, or you go to Philadelphia and you see some folks behaving like they behave. But here in Chicago, I think that, and not to suggest that there isn't some awfulness that happens in the stands at different games. It happens everywhere. But I think I think there's a ton of teams, and it's not just limited to professional sports. It's not just the Bears and the Bulls and the White Sox and the Cubs and the Blackhawks. It's college, like this used to be a huge college basketball town, and hopefully it will become one again. There is just so much for people to wrap their arms around, and I think that's what I noticed. When you're playing, you can know whether or not a fan base is involved and excited and is entertained, or they're just going through the motions. And when you're at Soldier Field and there's 63,000 people, and just think about going through this past playoff run. Like, I've never been in a stadium that was as loud and as raucous in a good way as what we saw when the Bears were playing Green Bay in the postseason, and then when the Rams came to town. I just think it was symbolic. It kind of took me back to what sports means to this city. And through the championship years or through the difficult seasons, I think it's something that brings everyone in our community together, gives you something to talk about, gives you something, to just exchange conversations and thoughts about. And again, I think it's a very competitive town, and I think everyone wants their teams to be great. But I think more than anything, and we say this on our show all the time, this is a town we want to love our teams, and we're willing to give you second and third and fourth chances as long as you demonstrate the desire to actually want to win, which is a topic for maybe another time. But I think it's such a special place. I've been here since '89, and my wife and I raised our 4 daughters here, and just have no desire to leave.
There's a Midwestern sensibility,
There
I think,
is.
and for those of us who have been around, again, I think between the 3 of us, we've probably been to just about every state. I've covered games in like 45 of the 50 states. Like, you meet different people from different walks of life and different backgrounds, and there's a Midwestern sensibility with a big city feel in Chicago, with a lot of teams, with a lot of wide-ranging interests, with a lot of wide-ranging passions. So I think that amalgamation of everything creates a very, very, very specific feel in this city that you're not going to find anywhere else.
And there you go. These two are very smart journalists. I'm a dumb football player. He said it much more eloquently than I could have. So thank you.
You got me with tangential.
Thank you for picking me up.
I guess we're speaking to different parts of the audience then, so that works out well. So, we talk with our students a lot, and definitely during Writers Week, about, writing matters everywhere, right? Not just in the classroom, right? But everywhere that you go. And I think you're seeing a big piece of that here. How important is writing and storytelling in your work, and how does it show up differently depending on your role or the roles that you assume?
I think Maddie can speak probably to like the specific style, like of true writing, day to day to day, writing on the beat, writing on features. Like Tommy will tell you he's not a journalist, but I think what he is a griot. He's a storyteller. Like from the start of his time here to now, I think that is a cumulative story that Tom has told, whether he was on TV or on the radio. And I think for me, like my story is written on the fly with a lot of context and background coming in. But between the 3 of us, we all do like our own style. Like it's our own version of writing. So you may not, like, I'm not a writer. I don't write as eloquently as Maddie might, but I can write on the fly. And like during a game, I have stories coming into a game. I know where I want to go, where I want to bring an audience with us. If we have, a big NFL game, like high stakes with 2 teams, I know what the storylines are. And then for us, what's fun for me is I get to document it as it happens, so I have to be on my toes. With all this information that I come in with, I'm always on my toes to be ready to pivot to the next story. I think it's a little bit different for what all 3 of us do, but we all have our own versions of it.
Yeah, I think mine is probably the most obvious in how big writing is for my job. But I will say, like, I don't know if you guys still teach essays this way, but when I was in high school, it was the 5-paragraph essay, and your introduction explains what you're gonna say, your next 3 graphs says those things, and then your last paragraph wraps it up and says what you just said. And at the time, I was like, okay, like, when am I ever gonna use this? It's kind of fascinating how close really story structure, even for sports writing, follows that. And it's not exactly the same, right? Like, often my lead, instead of just being an AP lead where you say exactly what happens right off the bat, I'll often kind of tap into something that happened and paint a scene and all of that. But within that, you have to have essentially your thesis, or your nut graph is what we call it. And so it's very much the same format where you're starting off at the top, you're saying the why I'm writing this right now, why it matters, then you do it, and then at the end you try to tie it up back to the top. And that's even with game stories, that's with features. There's so much in that where if you are taking those reps in so many different classes or whatever you happen to be writing, even if it's a history class, having those reps absolutely will pay off down the road, no matter what your writing might look like later in life, whether you are doing something like one of us or you write in pretty much most jobs. So I just want to say, like, whatever you're learning right now, it might not seem like it's going to be applicable later in life, and you will be shocked at how much it does pop up.
I would say it was the most difficult thing I found about this industry. You know, and being fortunate to really do everything from sportscasts on the nightly, you know, local news to writing an article for a local newspaper. What I found most difficult was trying to tell a 3.5-minute story, you know, with the details that were necessary, but not getting behind the highlights. Like I struggled with that initially because telling that story in a concise but colorful way is an art form. And from, you know, that I thought in my, you know, transition from being an athlete to being part of the media, that was the thing that I found to be most challenging, because somebody told me a long time ago, remember, less is more, less is more, less is more, because you only have speaking specifically about a sportscast, you have 3.5 minutes to tell the story that is being accompanied by highlights and everything else. And I think it's the most difficult portion of what we do. You know, on the radio, it's just light comes on 4 hours and there's no, you know, semicolons, there's no, you know, exclamation, well, there's a lot of exclamation points, but there's no commas, there's run-on sentences. You know, you don't have to worry about that stuff, and you have a longer period of time to tell the story. When you're either writing a column or you're writing a sportscast, I found that to be, I get better over the course of time, but I found that to be the most difficult challenge of the industry for me.
I think the elements of it are all the same. Like, if you are reading a story about two teams, or you're tuning into a game that of two teams that you're not familiar with, your job is to figure out, or our job is to figure out who is important, what are they doing, why does it matter, perhaps how are they doing it. Like, these are the elements of journalism and writing and storytelling that are never going to go away, because you're just identifying the basic elements of anything that you want to know about. Who is your friend? Why is she doing this? How is he doing that? Like, these are stories and structures that you deal with on a daily basis when you and your friends share stories about what happened in fourth period. Like, it's the same thing. If you can't give details, if you can't get those elements in, then you're probably doing something wrong. You're trying to tell a story, you need to know who's doing it, what are they doing, why are they doing it, why the heck is this person doing this ridiculously stupid thing, how is this person doing this amazing feat. Like, these are the basic elements of all of that. None of that is ever going to go away regardless of what medium you choose. If you choose this profession, if you choose another profession, like, or if you're just talking to your friends at dinner, like, that's never going to go away. The who, the what, the how, and the why in particular are four of the most important elements. And the where is a little bit of like the color and giving you a sense of place. But I think those other four never go away at any point in terms of doing this job.
One other thing I would mention too is I found very quickly, having been on both sides of this coin, as I'll speak for myself, as a broadcaster, I'm not the story. What I'm doing is I'm, you know, telling the story of what we just saw.
Yeah.
These successes or the failures of the athletes or the teams. And I think that, you know, there's an element of, I wouldn't call it arrogance, but importance that you have to check at the door. Like, everyone feels their perspective is important, and it is. I'm not trying to minimize it. But at the same time, in this craft, I found, again, and having been on both sides of it, you have to constantly remind yourself you're not the story. You know, you're telling the story of what's happening, whether it's on the baseball field or the basketball court or the football field. And I think it gets lost sometimes in this industry. And I think it's easily noticed that, hey, that guy or that gal's, they're trying to make themselves the story. And I think that was one of the fundamental things that was really important to me, was just remember, you know, the days of you being the story are gone, okay? Now you're telling stories of what other people are doing. And I thought that was really an important commodity that, I think Gene Greco said that to me one time, and it resonated with me forever. And then he went and punched, I think, you know, one of the other anchors because that's just who he was.
I feel like we could tap into that, like, hot take culture conversation.
It
'Cause I feel like,
sucks.
yeah,
It sucks.
And that's probably an entire period in and of itself. But I would say, to go along with this, and Maddie, this one might be a little bit directed more towards you, but How do you decide that stories are worth telling, right? To avoid some of the pitfalls that Tom is talking about when there's so much happening every day. And my assumption is there are things you're assigned to, but also how do you then seek out things? How do you find stories that you want to tell?
Yeah, I've been really lucky in my career where I've had great editors who have really just empowered me and put it in my hands to like, you shape your beat. Like whatever stories you want to tell, you go ahead and tell them. And if you can explain why this makes sense on a given day, then go for it. So obviously, I mostly cover. I'm a Cubs beat writer now, so I am following one single team for all 162 games and all of spring training and however many playoff games they play. And that can get long. Like in the middle of August, you're like, whew, man, I've already written about all of these guys in here. And you have to find something new. You have to find something new to tell your audience and to be able to explain to them why it makes sense, why they should pick up a newspaper, why they should pay whatever fee, although the Sun Times is free, please feel free to tap in.
Subscribe now, please.
Yeah, subscribe, support local news. But you know, it takes time. Like there's so many outlets out there. You have to set yourself apart and be able to say, look, you can't get this anywhere else. This is what you should do. This is where you should come for our Cubs coverage. And so I think what's really served me well is honestly just following my own curiosity. I figure if I want to know the answer to something, someone else probably does too. And so I follow that and I ask a bunch of questions and ask a ton of people those same questions, and often partway down the line I'll come up with another line of questioning and that becomes a whole different story. But I think, you know, curiosity is such a deep-rooted part of this industry and something that is easy to lose over the course of a long season. You're going to there are always people at a backdrop and you're always going through those big group interviews. But the stuff that's like really interesting and the stuff that's worth reading and that's worth telling your audience about, that often happens away from those big group meetings and is just you asking people off to the side. And so in the course of 162 games, that's really, really necessary.
I would ask again, like a quick show of hands. Do you guys feel like your mind races a lot? Yes or no? If yes, just raise your hand. I'm curious, like how your brains work. We're like 25 years separated, 22 years separated between like us and you guys. My mind races all the time, and when I was 16, 17, 18, it would always just go. It moved to a different thought. Maybe I had undiagnosed ADHD. I don't know. Maybe that was the case. But the word that she said that stuck out to me was curiosity. And you have to kind of quiet your brain for like 5 seconds. And I think you'll be shocked what comes into your head if you just kind of quiet yourself down and observe the situation that you're there to cover. Like, Alex Bregman just signed a big contract with the Cubs. He's the new third baseman for the Cubs. I've known Alex since he was a college student at LSU. And what always fascinated me about him was like he was always curious about what was the next thing he could do to get a little bit better at his job. He wanted to learn Spanish. Alex speaks pretty fluent Spanish for anybody, but especially for a kid that's not his first language. He wanted to learn that because he has a lot of Latin American teammates. He wanted to be a better communicator. He wanted to be a leader on his team. And he thought, I can't do this if I can't communicate with my Spanish-speaking teammates. So he set out to do that. And I heard that story when I was a rookie baseball broadcaster, and I thought, that is really impressive to me. I wonder who else has done that. So I went into a clubhouse for the Astros one day, and I asked some of his other teammates, like, hey, what's your favorite part about, like, Alex and what he does? And they all said the same thing. He makes us laugh in Spanish, and that's not something very easy to do. And it was literally 5 seconds of going, I wonder what his teammates think. And that was it. And that was a story. And that was something that I've had in my back pocket since Alex was in Major League Baseball. And I'm sure that's a story that'll come out at some point in Chicago, but it's been fairly well documented. But it's just that 5 seconds of quieting, observing, and then going, I wonder what. I wonder what, and then what are the next 5 words? And that's a story. That's a potential story that comes out. That's a storyline that we can discuss. That's something that we can do on a broadcast. You guys can talk about in the air. Maddie can write a feature about that. Like, that's where those story ideas and that's where the human element of all this comes in.
And I will add to that, then write it down.
Yeah.
I have a notes app that just is a running list of, because it comes to you like you're grocery shopping and an idea pops in your head. Write it down because you will forget later.
Yeah, great, just practical advice, I think, for all of us, especially for those of us who have minds that race at a pretty constant rate.
My mind doesn't race. I just don't remember anything. So writing it down is very
Also
important to me.
helpful,
I
yeah.
still, to this day, like my radio partner, Mark Silverman, writes everything on his phone. Everything I have is on like a legal pad.
Sure.
Like anything that I'm thinking, I write down. I don't know if that makes me a dinosaur in this industry, but it
I'll tell you
works
right now,
for me.
whatever works to keep information. All of you process information in different ways, and by the way, it's not going to be the same now as it will be in 10 years, as it will be in 15, as it will be in 20 years. All of your brains process and absorb information in completely different ways. So you, regardless of what profession you go into, your job over the next, or one of your jobs over the next like 15 years is to figure out what's the best way for me to use the information that I get. How do I remember it, absorb it, process it, disseminate it in my head, break it down? That's part of my like style. I think you were talking about, you know, the elements of this job, and most jobs are the same, but everybody has a different style with which they work. Like Maddie's style is different from the other beat writers for the Cubs. My style as a broadcaster is very different from other broadcasters. Tom's style as a radio host is different than anybody else's, and that's taken time. That's taken cultivation over reps, stories written, broadcast done, like we have to figure out what our style is, and a lot of that is just how does our brain process and disseminate this sort of information. Do we do it with humor? Do we do it seriously? Can we do it with a little bit of both? That's part of your job over the next like 10 years, is to figure out what's the best way for my brain to process information.
I think most of the crowd just wants to know what a legal pad is. So.
That really
It's,
hurts.
uh,
That hurt more than I
like
thought it was going to.
Bunch of paper that's kind of connected. It's not anything legal. I'm not saying I have to use legal pad because I find myself in legal predicaments.
When my nephew uses the term unk, my nephew's 18, when he says unk, this is what I feel like he's
Yeah,
referring to.
right,
This is it.
right.
This is right now an unk moment for me.
I thought that was uncle up until like 2 weeks ago.
No,
so
I learned I'm just
turns
old.
out,
I'm
no.
just old as hell. That's what I realized.
We got about 9 minutes left, so I want to take some questions before I ask what will be the final question for this session. So, do we have some people in the crowd that have questions? What do you guys got? All right in front. Something that they're covering right now that sticks out, or anything. Sports story you're working through,
Yeah.
maybe.
Currently or all time?
All time.
time.
Oh, wow.
I will say by far the most impactful sports story that I've ever covered was, some of you will get exactly where I'm going when I start this. I was covering the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2020, and in March, the Utah Jazz came to town. It seemed like it was going to be just a normal day. We just started doing COVID-19 precautions, so we weren't allowed in the locker room pregame, but we still got press conference, yada, yada, yada. And then they come out for tip-off, and everything ground to a halt. And that was the beginning of the NBA shutting down for the pandemic. So that was crazy. So there's lots of stories I can pick out, but as far as events, I don't think I'll be able to top that.
I interviewed Dennis Rodman when he was dressed in a wedding dress. I used to do book reports with Phil Jackson. We would sit up at the old, what was there?
Berto Center, right?
What?
Berto Center?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Berto
in
Center
Deerfield.
up in the suburbs, and Phil's office sat above the court, and they had like a little sitting area out there. I was doing a show at the time called Bull Sox Underground. This is a way back machine. But I had an opportunity once every 3 weeks to do book reports with Phil Jackson, and what a not only great guy and great coach, but just a deep thinker. I remember covering the Bears Super Bowl with against the Colts completely forgot what I was there for because Prince was playing the halftime show. And growing up in Cincinnati, Prince was my favorite performer. And to see him perform while it was raining and he did Purple Rain, I'll never forget it. And then I was kind of like completely lost touch with what was going on. And then when we were covering the game afterwards, it was still raining. I remember getting the shock of my lifetime with the equipment I had attached to my, standing next to Corey McFerrin, yeah, and got shocked up my right leg and basically had nothing to say for like 30 seconds. I didn't know what was going on. I think my heart rate had to go back to normal. But yeah, I mean, there's 1,000 things but yeah, I think some of the interactions with those Bulls dynasty teams were probably the things that I will remember most with regard to this industry because it was new to me and I hadn't gone to school for this, and now I'm kind of thrust into this role, so I got to figure out interesting things to try and draw out of Dennis Rodman as he's in a wedding dress. It was fun. It was cool.
I think in a 15-year broadcast career, I've had I've been very fortunate. I've seen a million different cool things. The three that stick out to me are all like inflection points where it's like, oh, this is a big moment, and I'll always have this. I called the Kick Six game in 2013. It was Auburn and Alabama playing in the Iron Bowl. It's when Chris Davis returned a missed field goal for the game-winning touchdown that sent Auburn to the SEC championship game. I called that on national radio. 5 years later, I called the women's Final Four when a young woman who still plays professionally in Dallas, Arike Ogunbowale, hit back-to-back game winners in the Final Four to beat UConn, and then Mississippi State won the national championship. And then this past October, I covered a Major League Baseball playoff game that went 15 innings. It was the longest winner-take-all playoff game in the history, in 20-year history of Major League Baseball. So those are all like moments that I get talked to about a lot, but those are the three that kind of stick out. And there's a million things in between, but those are like the inflection points, and those are the things that I'm sure Maddie would say, Tom would say too. Like if we gave us some time, like we would have like five of those in our.
I feel like such an underachiever after you listed those off, Adam. I'm talking about interviewing, never mind.
I haven't done book reports with 10-time champion coaches, so one of these days.
More questions. What do we got?
I can't recreate it because I think you'll just have to go to TikTok to figure that out. That was another moment. That might have been an inflection point where my nephew goes, "Hey, did you do the Oh My Goodness Valentine moment?" I was like, "Yeah, that was me." So for those of you who have shot your shot and failed miserably, you're welcome. I help you cope with that. I actually feel a little bad about it now because I don't want that moment to define one person's career. It's a bad shot, man. Like it was just a bad shot more than anything else, and that was how we felt in the moment. That's part of documenting it too. Like that's part of the being on the fly. Like my job, like we don't get it back. I don't get that moment back. Like if I gotta nail it in whatever moment pops up, my goal is to be 100% perfect at all times. It is impossible to do it, but the goal is to be as good as humanly possible and to be as human as possible. That was a human reaction that we had to that shot in that moment based off of the build up to the end of that game in Miami. Like that's just the reaction that popped up. And a lot of what we do is our initial reactions and then how do we shape them and formulate them either in the moment or afterwards when we're writing the story or the day after when we're kind of contextualizing it.
I feel like we need to like make that trend. Like you all need to get out there, find that clip, send it back out there again. It
was an interesting few days when that popped up. That was fun to see.
And we got about 2 minutes, so one more question maybe. Way up top.
Do I think Giannis will come to the Bulls? Tommy, what do you think?
I'm going to leave this to you. I don't know why.
I'm the one going to Milwaukee tonight, so I don't know. I'll try to get a scoop if we can.
I'm going to say something that you're not going to be able to respond to because you're too nice a guy. A, how are you going to make it work? B, why would he want to come here?
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, personal opinion, just for us in the room, just us gals. Like, no, I don't think so. I think you'd be mortgaging a lot to just bring him in when you're trying to rebuild.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible first hour. They're going to be back again next hour.
Thanks,
Give him a
everybody.
huge round of applause. Thank you for being a great audience. If you want a sec, come on up and say hello.